People who moved to a different state or region. What's one cultural thing that caught you by surprise? I moved from the Netherlands to India to study abroad. I found out that Indian people are literally always late, or don't show up at all. I would often find myself stressed because I was running late, but arrive and everyone, including professors, were at least 15 minutes later than me. The feeling of stress when running late never left, even when knowing it was accepted. I moved to Alaska a few years back. The thing that caught me most by surprise is nearly a flip on what people consider to be personal safety. Like, in winter you wouldn't go anywhere without keeping extra blankets, water, tools, and other things in your car in case you have some sort of breakdown on the road. But when you stop at a gas station or convenience store, everyone leaves their cars unlocked and running as if unafraid of getting it stolen. But then again, I never heard of someone getting their car stolen when they left it running somewhere. Briefly moved to Virginia. The sheer amount of people who, when asked where they were from, specified Northern Virginia was astonishing. Not any place in particular, just "Oh, we're from Northern Virginia." Ha, that's because Virginia is basically the most northern state in the South, and Northern Virginia is not the South at all. If you hear a twang, you're not in Northern Virginia. I think the border is right around Fredericksburg. Northern Virginia people have a bit of a reputation as snooty. Source: Northern Virginia raised, living in Richmond. It's night and day. Grew up in New England, moved to NorCal. I was amazed at how nice and friendly everyone was. People say good morning when they pass you on the sidewalk. It freaked me out at first, but I got to like it. Moved back to New England and now I'm a weirdo who is friendly to strangers. I'm Australian and now live in Sweden. People are so serious. Granted, Australians are generally very laid back, but at work people always rush and stress. Even though this is a brilliant country with great conditions, I feel lazy because I'm not stressed out like them. One of Australia's former prime ministers used to hold the world record for chugging a yard of beer. That fact would feature prominently in attack ads in some countries. Everyone said the winters in Minnesota would be awful. The winters were fine. I own a coat. No one told me I'd have swampers 5 months of the year. Autumn is beautiful though, all 2 weeks of it. I moved to the Philippines when I was 5. I was surprised with the fascination all of the other kids had with my golden hair, blonde, and the fact I was circumcised. We had a swim class where the kids would change in the locker rooms. That's how they knew I had a weird looking dong. AI Blondie, get over and show Gabriel your weird dong end. He hasn't seen it yet. Moved to Wisconsin and it's the cheese alcohol culture. Don't get me wrong, I dove head first into it and love it, but you usually think it's just a joke people say about Wisconsin. Every event or get together there are multiple cheese plates and beer liquor everywhere. When you go to a restaurant at 8 AM for breakfast, 9/10 people have either beer or a Bloody Mary. It's the best state. I was in Chicago for work earlier this year. I had an open Friday, so I decided to drive up to Milwaukee. As soon as I crossed the border it was cheese everywhere. Antique stores advertising cheese, truck stops with big cheese signs, a freaking cheese castle. I was blown away. I grew up on the East Coast and moved out to Oregon. My first day at college here, a buddy I met was buying a few ounces off of Craigslist. I 100% thought it was going to be a cop, and kept telling him that along with the other East Coaster we befriended. Turns out my buddy had his med card and was doing a completely legal transaction. Everyone is high in this state basically. And we like it that way. Lots of places outside of the valley is essentially time warp to the 1800s though. I moved to South Florida from New Jersey. Before NJ I lived in Connecticut. South Florida is like a different country. First, it is a crossroads of so many different cultures and nationalities who maintain a good deal of cultural autonomy. My first job was with a cigar company owned by Cubans in an office where practically nobody spoke English. Not chose to speak Spanish. Did not know English. That was very interesting. I walked away with a much better understanding of how educational immersive environments can be for acquiring language. Also, the surrounding area operated entirely in Spanish. Except for Starbucks, almost every commercial interaction began in Spanish. Once you get outside the Miami area there are people from all over South America and the Caribbean. At one of my jobs I worked with people from Bolivia, Venezuela, Colombia, A massive amount of Brazilians, people from Haiti, and Jamaica. I'm probably forgetting some nations. It is absolutely fascinating. One thing I find interesting is that as a northerner we tend to pride ourselves on being inclusive and unprejudiced. However, the view from the north tends to seem very binary, white non-white, whereas down here there is a much more nuanced spectrum. People are from so many places and you can't necessarily tell where someone is from based on their appearance. In the northeast there tends to be an idea that Spanish-speaking people all look like the Indian populations of Central and South America, and that isn't true at all. Even the people who are descendants of the native populations look very different depending where they are from. An indigenous person from Brazil looks different than an indigenous person from Mexico. So it seems strange to me that as proud as the North is for being progressive, it seems to hold a very narrow or limited understanding of just how diverse South American, Central American, and Caribbean people actually are. There is a great deal of European, Eastern European diversity as well. Lots of Russians, French Canadians, and Germans. And I work with a Lebanese family now. Also a little shocking is the visibly destitute populations. Where I live is right near a lot of drug treatment programs and halfway houses. People from up north are sent down for treatment, and if they quit or are kicked out of their program, many of them become homeless. I love how different the animals are down here. Instead of squirrels we have lizards everywhere. At the cigar company I worked for, one of the girls said to me, "You can't teach an old parrot new words," which I loved for its regional specificity. Clearly she comes from a place where contact with parrots is more common than I'm used to. The ocean is here is the stuff of dreams. The water is sometimes crystal clear and always full of life. The first time I swam out to a reef with a dive mask and saw a sea turtle was one of the most awe-inducing moments of my life. Yay, race is totally different in other cultures. Like in Cuba for example, people are a whole spectrum of pale to black. It's definitely not binary and less important. New Jersey for 26 years, then moved to Colorado. Mexican food is awesome, but I cannot find anything even close to good Italian food. The dryness is a huge issue for me and I am still not drinking enough water, lol. People are also way friendlier. Took me about a year to not feel weird when someone talks or smiles at me. I have definitely gotten friendlier since moving out here. Visiting New York, I was blown away by the food trucks carts. You could sample food from several different countries in one afternoon without stepping foot in a restaurant. East Coast to Texas. Breakfast tacos are a thing, and now I can't imagine a world without them. Need some kolaches in your life too. I'm from Tennessee and now live in Boston. People just don't talk to each other. Like, no friendly small talk even. It seems like people would rather die than interact with a stranger. I'm used to making a new best friend every time I had to wait in line somewhere. I'd always heard that northerners were rude and I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I had thought that the lack of friendliness was exaggerated. It feels kind of cold and lonely up here sometimes. It's not the North, it's New England. Move to Wisconsin or Michigan. Anywhere upper Midwest really, and you'll have more new friends than you can shake a stick at. New England weather. It just freaking does whatever it wants and answers to nobody. I moved from the south of England to the north, and I was surprised by just how safe I felt there. I don't think north and south matters much for safety in the UK. I've lived in Corby, Nottingham and Winchester, and Winch always felt safest, but I've never had a problem in Nottingham either. Corby is different because it's my hometown, so I never feel safe in some clubs, but the town in general is pretty safe these days. Moved from Los Angeles to Philadelphia. Everyone jaywalks here. Stoplights are like a joke to people. If you don't see a car or see the next car likely won't come for 5 seconds or so, you cross that street. I love the reverse of this as well. Literally had an acquaintance get hit by a car here in La because she jaywalked right after saying I'm from New York. Cause stop. I moved from Michigan to Los Angeles, CA, when it barely rained, and I mean barely a drizzle, for half an hour. People cancelled plans, the cable and Wi-Fi went out, and people would bolt to their cars like they were getting soaked. Now I do understand the cancelling plans because the roads are covered in oil, but everything else just didn't make sense to me. It rained about a week ago. People are still talking about it. It's going to rain this weekend. People have been talking about it since Monday. People here eat chili with their cinnamon rolls. What the heck? I'm sure it's good, but it's just so weird. Grew up in AZ, moved to GA. People in the East don't wear jeans to casual events like a family barbecue or birthday party. They are dressed like we would dress for work or church, business casual, at the least. Most of my wardrobe was jeans, so I felt very underdressed at my first GA BBQ. Oh, did not expect this to create such debate. My personal experience was from 1998 until 2003. I lived in Gwinnett County, Norcross Duluth area. In general, my observation was that jeans were worn at home, not to social functions where the primary reason for gathering was visiting with people, luncheons, picnics, birthdays. I'm sure all you Southerners know what I mean. Also, my use of BBQ is wrong in the Southern sense. Sorry, what I'm actually referring to are what you would maybe call cookouts. Here in AZ, a BBQ means any method of grilling of any kind of meat, steaks, hamburgers, ribs, etc. We know about the difference in types of barbecue and enjoy them, but are more casual about our definitions. This is like you calling all soda Coke. You Atlantans know what I mean. Finally, Arizonans wear jeans to everything. Nice restaurants, church, and some people even wear them to weddings, as guests. Part of why I said Easterners is that my parents were from the Northeast and we moved to AZ when I was a year old. I was literally the only kid in school who didn't wear jeans. My mother had an aversion to buying them even though I begged and begged. I think I finally got my first pair when I was around 7-8 and they were all I wanted to wear because that's all anyone else wore. Grew up in South Jersey and now live in PA, and people hate, and I mean hate, when you refer to Italian ice as water ice. Californian here, I have no idea what either of those are. Moved from upstate NY to South Carolina in HS. They called the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. Never once had I heard it called that in NY. It was then I realized that history is skewed based on people's views. Also, if you didn't call those an authority ma'am or sir, they thought you were disrespectful. You guys is not a proper term in the South and people will make fun of you for it, but it's perfectly okay to say all y'all. So I should clarify it was one old teacher in SC who called it the War of Northern Aggression. She had worked at the school 30 years and looked like a toad. Other kids and adults mentioned it more jokingly. I did generalize and made it sound like everyone did it when in reality it was one old bat. Moved from New York to Utah. It's interesting to see such a stark difference in the cultural norm of when to get married and have kids. For Utah, the average age of marriage for women is 23, so most of my friends here are already married and thinking about children. But in New York, most of my friends are really only in semi-serious relationships and haven't even thought about marriage yet. Neither way is better, but it's the most stark difference I've encountered. I live in NJ and the average age of my friend group is around 30. Most of us are just getting around to marriage and only one of us has a kid, and she was an accident. Grew up in Southern California. Moved to Texas a few years back. 1. What church do you go to is a question that comes up within the first 10 minutes of the first conversation when meeting someone. 2. Y'all, and all y'all. 3. People get weird about the Southern CA habit of putting the in front of freeways, i.e. Newport Beach take the 5 to the 405 to the 55. I didn't last in Texas. We moved back to CA after 3 years. And, yeah, that's more than one thing, but whatever. Moved from PA to CA. A lot of things caught me by surprise, but the thing that weirded me out the most at the beginning was high quality fresh produce even in the hood out here. When I was broke in PA, my options were canned everything, paying extra attention to sell by dates because a lot of stock was expired, or wilted veg and moldy cheese at the corner store. Out here, even the 99-cent store has decent fresh fruits and veg. When I first started dating my now husband, he thought I was sectarian for bypassing a Mexican grocer in favor of the 7-Eleven next door. He didn't truly get it until I took him back east for Thanksgiving one year and gave him a tour of the neighborhood I lived in before I lucked into a stable, full-time job. We got food deserts here as well, but since a lot of produce is based in CA, we get fresh produce year round. moved from Costa Rica to Guatemala. It breaks my heart to see kids going through the trash and watching you eat with those big sad eyes. I just can't imagine how bad this country was in terms of poverty. I live that every day at college. Never imagined this was a reality back in Costa Rica, where kids go to school and are just kids. I know there are some that work, but that's not common. I end up giving my food away to them and the joy they feel is just out of this world. I moved to the American South, like the Deep South, back in the early 90s when I graduated high school. I grew up in a pretty integrated low-class neighborhood in a major city in the north. I moved with my best friend because his father was living there temporarily while helping his friend set up a new business. He got us both jobs for the startup. Anyway, we were both really shocked by the casual racism and the fact that it was more or less out in the open. What shocked us even more was when we met some black dudes and were partying with them and the conversation came around to this very subject of what two northern white boys found weird about the South. When we both said all the racism without even thinking about it for a second, they all freaked out. Or, heck no, ain't no xenophobe around here and crap. I'd fight a motherfucking xenophobe if I saw one. I realized that crap was so normalized down there that they had no idea what it was like in other places. That crap was crazy to us. Like if any of our black friends from back home went with us there, who knows what might have happened to them if they didn't adapt to the culture down there? At least that was what I was thinking. A few years later I moved back to my hometown and went to college. I became very close to and had a mentor-mentee relationship with one of my college professors, who happened to be a black man. I remember telling him about my experiences down there and how weird it felt for me. He said something else that shocked the heck out of me. I actually prefer the South to the North, because down there it's all in the open, so you know right away who is and isn't a xenophobe. Up here you never know. That was a real eye-opener for me and something I never forgot, all these years later. When I was abroad in Mexico, there were two big things that really surprised me. One was the way that Mexicans signaled to waiters and restaurants that they need something, which was to literally wave the waiter over. The first time I saw someone do that, I was horrified, but it turned out to be a totally normal thing there and the waiters were never offended. The second was the complete lack of respect for the sanctity of an occupied public bathroom stall. I cannot count the number of times that I had someone hammer on the stall door while I was taking a crap in a public restroom, and then continue knocking every 30 seconds even after I yelled occupado at them each time. To be clear, there were always plenty of other stalls in these bathrooms, and I don't take a long time to crap unless there's a fricking Mexican SWAT team pounding on the door every 30 seconds, causing my butthole to knot up each time and drawing out the process. Grew up on the East Coast and moved to California when I was in my 20s. I was so excited to go to the beach on a nice hot day. Was shocked to learn that in the Bay Area it can be a sunny warm day, but it's freezing cold and windy at the beach. B. The water's too cold to swim in. 3. There's no boardwalk or people around. Basically what beaches are like in California is nothing like beaches on the East Coast. Well, Northern California anyway. So the East Coast culture of escaping to shore beach towns over the summer weekends doesn't really exist. French Canadian. Moved from an all-French environment in QC to MB. Had a really rough time for the first few years because I didn't speak English at a passable level for my age at the time. 10. English wasn't really taught properly in QC, and it was made obvious when we moved. My vocabulary sucked. My reading comprehension was almost non-existent, and as far as understanding English, I was probably at a grade 1 level at best, as opposed to my classmates who had spoken it their whole lives. Grade 5. It was rough, and I got picked on, mostly because I had an accent. I caught by surprise by how awful my English was, and I had to catch up fast. I'm an American who moved to Ontario about 8 years ago, and it absolutely blew my mind that there is an entire province where it wouldn't be unheard of for the people to not be fluent in English. My family and I moved from Massachusetts to Colorado when I was entering high school. The biggest shock was the weather. Everyone thinks because of the mountains Colorado would be cold. The state has some years where they get 300+ days of sun, plus there is no humidity. So if it is sunny and 30s, it feels warmer. Everyone there was so laid back and friendly too. Everyone's friendly because there's no goddamn oxygen up here. Oh my heck, and the first time you get invited to a steakhouse is just a cruel trick. There is no steak. I too grew up in Utah. Moved to a smaller community from the suburbs. We wanted a little more land and our suburbs doubled in population and was turning into an absolute zoo. This smaller community, not really that small, but not the 300k population area we left. Everyone knows everything. We kind of knew that going in, we knew what to expect. But I didn't realize the extent of it. Every single person has history with every other person. This person was that person's first kiss. This group hates that group since grade 5, and it continues as adults to this day. Kids from one hockey team will get cut just because the kid's parent and the coach didn't get along in grade 9. It's absolutely ridiculous. A picture goes up on Facebook and all of a sudden my wife is getting texts, so you are friends with that person. That kind of thing. Man, we're just nice to everyone, and we don't really care about who likes who, and what just hanging out with this or that person implies. It implies nothing more than we are just nice people that get along with everyone. It's bonkers and out of control. Bury the hatchet. Move on. Be rad to each other. The pace at which people conduct their affairs, drive, talk, etc. Everything in the South goes so slow. I mean, I'm comfortable with it now, but holy heck, the front of the checkout line is not the place to catch up on old times with the cashier when there are 6 people waiting behind you. I moved from New Jersey to Savannah, Georgia. It took me 6 months to stop being suspicious of everyone I passed on the street. They just kept smiling at me and saying hello like freaking psychopaths. Here's an oddly specific one. When I moved from New Jersey, Delaware to Maryland, I found that when someone in their mid-20s asks you where do you go to school, they aren't asking what university college, they are asking what high school. They could not care less where you got your degree. They want to know what county you grew up and if your schools were rivals. Moved from NJ to Florida and holy crap, I've never seen so many people who just don't give a crap what they look like when they go out. Pajamas and Uggs at the store, in the middle of the day. I live near Destin and I see this a lot. I love visiting Atlanta because at least people don't ask me where are you going all fancy. Work, Susan. I have on a maxi skirt and a cardigan. Not me, but my brother moved to Texas for work. My sister-in-law was not prepared for how important the local school's football team was to the small butt town and the glares when she didn't wear the school colors on Friday. California to Texas. Football is its own religion. How much more of a sense of community neighborhoods have in America? I was born in Britain, where it is not uncommon to have never met your neighbors in 10 plus years of living next door to each other. We moved to Texas and basically everyone on the street introduced themselves within the first week. That Missouri sucks. Holy heck, no part of life prepared me for how much, how deep, and how hard Missouri sucks. I moved from New Orleans to Columbia, MO, in 2009 and I could not get out of the state fast enough. Lived in the East Coast for a few weeks. First thing I noticed, a lot of historic buildings in the old colonial style. Instead of 7-11 they have a store called Wawa. Weird. We have 7-11 and Wawa sometimes next to each other. Wawa is superior, but 7-11 is clutch. We respect it. Just moved a week ago today to Louisiana from NJ. I got caught in my first speed trap. Speed limit went from 65 to 45 for a quarter of a mile on a straightaway for no reason. Apparently speed traps are common down here. Never saw it drop like that unless it's a residential area going through a town. But yeah, pretty hefty ticket. I'm used to the NJ Parkway where the speed limit's 65 but everyone's going 85. If you're not keeping up with the speed of traffic you're getting rammed off the road. I moved from Colorado to Kentucky. So much more affordable. People in Colorado are friendly, but people in Kentucky appear to have no understanding of the phrase personal information. My husband and I dropped our laundry off with a woman who proceeded to tell him that she couldn't have any more babies because she had had her ovaries removed. Everywhere we go, we get asked personal questions, or told very personal information. Grew up in Wisconsin and moved to Arizona. Biggest thing I've noticed, if it rains, everyone freaks out and forgets how to drive. So I've had a few cultural shock experiences. I left my native land of Northern California when I was 18 to join the military, and now at 30 live in Australia. The first big one happened before I even left the state. While in boot camp in Southern California, I was confronted by the bizarre fact that not everyone uses or understands the word hella, which to me was used as often as or uh. Living in Australia, the weirdest cultural revelation is that Aussies are basically the same as Americans, even if they don't want to admit it and will probably complain to anyone that listens that they aren't as bad as that. The moment of revelation for this one came when I was working with some guys and they were talking about somebody that had complained about too many Australian flags on Australia Day. Their final response was literally, "If you don't like Australia, then you can get out," which felt obscenely American. You have been visited by the Holy Doggo. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.